This is the Coffee and Technology podcast brought to you by Cropster. Anne Cooper is a coffee consultant based in Australia. Anne has spent a large part of her career between the US and Australia and has extensive knowledge across the entire supply chain. Anne is a world-renowned master coffee roaster. From barista to master coffee roaster and consultant, listen to Anne's journey across the coffee world, her approach to roasting, and how technology has enabled her to navigate remote consulting during COVID. Yes, thank you, Anne, for joining us. Norbert, I'm stoked to do this with Anne with you today and have some interesting discussions around coffee consulting. I'm really excited for this episode.
Very happy to have Anne here. We have known each other for a long time, and we haven't seen each other in person for a while, of course, but it's wonderful to have you, Anne.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as always, it's always an honor to, be able to be a part of these, podcasts with, companies like you and to, just have the opportunity to chat and have a voice in the industry. And I really appreciate that. And it's just, really so thankful. And and like you said, Norbert, like I think I was saying, I first started using Cropster I had a look at my records this morning. It was April 2015.
Nice.
When I first started, using Cropster. So, and I've just seen a lot, from then to now. So, but there for myself, as far as how I got into coffee and where I am today, I was the typical uni student, just working in a cafe to make ends meet. I was actually washing dishes. And then the front of house person didn't turn up one night, and they just looked at me and said, well, you're the next logical person to, jump out the front and start helping. So, so I started learning all the front of house stuff. And of course that meant learning how to make coffee. And never forget, those first, sounds of burning yourself and just going, what is this? Even like milk steaming was like, what is this crazy stuff? And I'll never forget the burns though on my arms. It was, But anyway, at the end, I really loved it, really loved hospitality. And I think like a lot of us, we really get attracted to the instant results part of being in hospitality, whether it be like, we're creating something for customers to enjoy, and there's a really awesome feeling that comes along with that. And so then I finished my my uni degree, kept on working in hospitality. Ironically, ended up back at university managing the coffee carts. So I did a lot of high volume work there, and then you sort of like actually start training people and managing and dealing with reps. The whole relationship part of coffee really starts playing a great role. And then through that, met some great people, did a bit of work in cafes, then started getting into training. I got an opportunity through one of the coffee companies to start taking on training for a lot of the franchising companies. So through that, sort of got to learn a little bit more of the corporate culture with coffee, which I thought was, really fascinating from that perspective. And then I got involved in the barista competitions. So I was my Queensland or state champion from 06 to 08. That was back in the day when, like, you had to do everything in the 15 minutes. Like it was like, time starts now and you've got to start setting the table and, it all happens in that time. And then obviously through that, I had to learn more about roasting. So got a chance to get more involved in, dipping my toes and learning that. And then through the competitions, then like I've sort of met some really great people. So I got my first roasting role with Develop Coffee in Brisbane. And so like, sort of learned lots of good, got more commercial roasting, lots of good processes and logistics and all that kind of stuff. And then, high volume, just basically feed the roasters, very manual, no Cropster. I think we basically had a diary where it was writing down the start temperature, the end temperature, and the total roast time. And I think that was it. Very simple. Then I kind of disappeared for a while from Australia. I moved to the US from 2009 till about 2014.
Oh, wow.
And I worked with Dallas Brothers in New York City. And so through that, and also being in the US, I then got the chance they were owned by a Brazilian company. So I had the chance to go down to the farm quite regularly, do a lot of training and work down there, but also got involved with the Barista Guild, the Roasters Guild. I competed at NERBC and did really well and managed to then qualify and compete at USBC. So I did baristas and cup tasters. That was so much fun, and got involved with Roasters Guild. So it was a really great chance I was, in the US, just get involved. And and I never forget you at retreat. I think we took some video of you doing the screen trays, Norbert. It was really fun. Yeah. So and as you know, just the networking and meeting people and just the events and everything was just fantastic. And of course, it was also the education side of things that, getting involved in that side of things as well. So then when I came back to Australia, I landed in Melbourne. Then I was the head roaster for Proud Mary, and then did a little bit of work with Axel. And then I was kind of going through that phase again of, like kind of what I did with my barista side of things. You hit a bit of a ceiling of like, well, what's next? Where do I go? What do I do? I've kind of really, done production, roasting quite full on. And I really wanted to tap back into my training, like I was doing with my barista work, previously in my career. So saw an opportunity to then start doing a roasting course. So that started in 2015. So it's been going for 6 years now. And then that's when I also started the consulting as well. So I saw an opportunity to, put myself out there based on my, both commercial and specialty experience, to start working with roasters here in Australia. Because a lot of us, it was a time when we were seeing all of the events happening either in Europe or US, and we're all traveling, back and forth to go to events. And so I wanted to bring some of that back to Australia and start, with the courses and, that kind of information and grounding for Aussie roasters that were looking for that. And then, here I am today. So in that time frame, I've been really spoiled. I've had the opportunity to use, oh my goodness, hundreds of different machines, be in many different roasting rooms and see many different, roasting setups. And I know, I call myself, roastress coops, master roasteress, all that kind of stuff. And I do take the word master quite, I treat it with a lot of respect, and I would never use the word master unless I felt I had, the appropriate experience, in the industry to be able to use that word. And feel, really, really comfortable and confident, walking into a roasting room and helping a roaster, even if it's on an unfamiliar machine, and using specific techniques and stuff that I've learned over the years, and really help them, be the best they can be. Because that's my job as a consultant, is to help roasters be the best they can be, and help them, make their coffee shine and just, succeed in every possible way. And so, with my journey, really passionate about helping and working with the next generation of flame keepers, and just, help keep the industry growing and evolving. And of course, incorporating, Cropster along the way, which has been a massive part of, my training and consulting. So thank you. It's been,
thank you.
It's been phenomenal. Yeah.
So, and just a quick question, or kind of a side question maybe, but so you ended up consulting roasting and focusing on roasting, but you really have worked along the entire supply chain from roasting towards end consumers, and with your farm visits, even on the other side.
Yep.
What made you decide for roasting and not being a barista trainer or a barista consultant or coffee consultant?
Because I think because of in that kind of barista journey, like with the training and whatnot, I actually did own a cafe for about a year, and I think I quickly realised, as far as it was a really good lesson, as many people realise, like just because you're the best barista doesn't mean you're necessarily either the best owner or manager, and really big lessons learned in terms of people management as a business owner. So I clearly was a great barista, and I could manage a team and everything, but was I the best at a cafe business? I probably at the time wasn't ready. I think I also remembered, I realized too, I think I was a sales rep for a roasting company. I think I lasted 2 weeks and I just went, sales is not where I'm at. So I think it was tapping back into that creative process, but also that, I guess I'm that personality, maybe like a lot of us roasters, where I'm okay with repetitive tasks, because roasting is very repetitive, but there's also a real creative, element to it as well. And I guess maybe because it was just a natural progression to move from, the barista world, because normally you would go, sometimes it's naturally to go into sales, and sales just wasn't after I felt I'd done what I wanted with being a barista. And so the opportunity to kind of step into roasting was there. And then just kind of then seeing, you learn pretty quickly how physical it is and how full on, the whole process is. But I've really enjoyed it. And I guess I was really lucky I was in a position, even as a barista as well, to be in a position where I could be constantly, I guess, like practicing and doing it over and over again. So you can keep on learning and improving. So I guess, I just kind of naturally just was good at it and was and could, probably because I had the opportunity to be in really good positions to be doing it over and over again and keep on practicing and getting better at it.
This is cool. So I just heard two really kind of keywords: the creative part of it and the repetitive, maybe mundane part of it. And if you can go a little bit more into that, because I'm really interested also from a technology side, where can technology support either of those things? And on the repetitive side, I have my answer, I believe, but let's first talk a little bit about like what are those parts and what makes them so exciting, like especially the creative part.
Well, I mean, I guess because with roasting, I guess like with coffee in general, and even as a barista and a roaster, like we've always got to remind ourselves we're in the business of flavour. We're creating something to be tasted. So there's that, creative aspect of then better understanding the roasting process. So we're really challenging ourselves. We're in a situation where we're managing a lot of things at once, while we're roasting. And I really loved, I was listening to some of the previous podcasts, and I really loved how Noah touched on the whole really in tune with the flavors he wanted to create. And he brought up my three key things. It was like he was in my brain. I was like, hey, because it's always know your green, know your machine, and know your flavors. And when you're really in tune with those, then you can start picking on, which parts of, technology and everything in the process can help me with that. So, I mean, sure, when we're, doing our production roasts and we've got some products that we need to be, pumping out consistently, that's when, if we've then got, whether it be some automation on the machine or our software that's backing us up, with our profiles. But the thing is, those elements, whether it be the machine or the software, they can't do anything until we tell them what we need it to do. So again, it comes back to us really knowing what we want to do, with that. So and then it brings up, as you've all, heard in the industry, lots of all the preferences about what's right, what's wrong, how do we know what's right or wrong, all that kind of stuff. Definitely along that whole knowing what we want to create, that's when we can then really use, the technology in a great way to help support us and be consistent every time.
Yeah, that's actually a little bit what I feel like, helping in that creative process of creating those profiles, right? And understanding what. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to know what the green actually is, right? If you don't have a lot of information from farmer processes, then you gotta roast a few times and kind of figure it out from that perspective.
Yeah, and I guess if you are missing a few things, but the one thing though as roasters we can always do, and I'm quite passionate about making sure roasters know, is in terms of, always knowing the size of the bean, the moisture content and the density. And then of course with those components, it's knowing where to direct them. And so where in the process do I focus on using the knowledge about the moisture? Where in the process do I, use that density knowledge and the screen size? And of course, then you've got batch size. And then it starts bringing up what we know about our machine, in terms of materials, build quality, drum type, burner type. How do we control it? So bringing up all that. And then if there's ways that we can help, I'm a really big fan. I think probably my biggest thing at the end of the day is really help roasters connect with the reality of roasting and trying not to go down that rabbit hole too deep. Like definitely analyze, and that's definitely what technology has allowed us to do better. It's allowed us to do better at analysis, 100%. And that's been fabulous, because then we can really then make great decisions. And that's my other passion point in roasting as well, is helping roasters be more decisive, and showing themselves. And again, that's where the technology helps to show us. We just then need to practice how to analyze and interpret what we're showing ourselves and what we're collecting with all of that amazing data, because it can be pretty daunting sometimes. And you've got a sea of numbers and a sea of lines and things going everywhere. And if you just don't quite know how to then, step back and know what to do with it, then, of course, it can be quite daunting for, some people.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting you say that just because to me it seems like, as a roaster, as a barista, you have all your recipes, your roast profiles, your machine, but at the end of the day, like your first roast, it's still kind of like a trial and error. And I can't imagine the coffee you must have gone through when you first start roasting them before you started using, different software solutions or whatever you use, versus now that you've implemented technology into, your workflows. And I can imagine just that alone has allowed you to save time and product just on that
Oh,
trial and error.
because you surely you would have heard roasters say, or they're trying to dial in a new coffee and they go, oh, I used the whole bag, and my last batch was the best.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
really, it should be within probably 3 roasts, I would say. You should be on top of nailing that coffee and on your way to hopefully then successfully roasting the rest of the bag, and not banging your head against the wall going, why did it take a whole bag to get to know it? But I also kind of put that down to in terms of what are we specifically focusing on as well, while we're roasting. And so making sure that we're not ourselves too much, with like looking at the wrong information. And so it's making sure we're looking at the right data points so you can make really good, clear decisions. Because in roasting, like, things are moving and they're moving fast. Like a second is a lifetime in roasting. Like, and if you don't know, things are changing, you've got to do something. And if you don't do it quick enough, and if you haven't trained yourself to look at the right decision points, then of course you are naturally going to be quite, a little bit stressed when you don't know what to do.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if I might deviate just for a second here because it came into my head, I'm preparing Austrian style pancakes on Sunday. Not every Sunday, but if I can. And this is like a little bit of routine we almost have at home. And these are like the thin, almost crepe style pancakes. And I reuse a recipe and I measure my ingredients, but the ingredients also change sometimes a little bit. Like the egg is a little bit different, the milk is a little bit different, and it comes down to focus and to like what the right heat in the pan. And it's such a simple thing. It's so far off from coffee. Coffee is very complex. I'm doing something very simple. And I always feel like, so if I'm in the zone, if I really focus and I can give it my full attention, the result is better. And if I get distracted because I'm brewing coffee on the side and I'm preparing the table and doing some other things, the pancake doesn't get the attention it needs, and then it can happen exactly what you just said. I use my whole dough, and the last one is like, oh, I nailed it, but it was the last one.
Yeah,
that's frustrating, right? So
definitely.
I could use more technology, but I don't, and well, it's all on me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but also too, like you were saying, with some of the ingredients changing, and little things like that can throw a little curveball at you. I often say too, in roasting, often the actual like process of whether it be learning to just operate the machine, put beans in the roaster, turn them brown, that you can learn that pretty quickly, pretty easily. I think the hardest part of roasting is learning all the green beans. It's learning all the differences. So, because what often because we'll learn our machine, we'll dial it in with a certain bean. We're really excited and happy. We go, yes, I've got a profile. Let's start roasting everything now. And then you change to a different bean and it doesn't work. And you kind of, you're confused because you're trying to use steps that suit a particular, bean, and you change to a really different bean that's got different properties. So then you need to, of course, change your steps to suit that, different bean. So yeah, that can be the often the hardest thing. The thing that takes the longest to learn, I think, is all the different beans, as well as, you learning how to back yourself and backing yourself in terms of your flavor profile, everything that you're passionate about, and knowing how to do that on your machine. But then, of course, you start changing ingredients. So then, the fun starts with adapting to that. Yeah.
But there was quite a controversy a few years ago when some importers started to put roast curves to the green coffees, and some people like it,
Oh,
others like don't.
yeah.
What's your take on it?
Um,
Can it be helpful? Is there anything?
Yeah, yes, I guess yes and no, because it is, I mean, obviously our curves or our profiles are very subjective in terms of it's a reflection of our palate and our flavour preference. So I guess, if they make it really clear that that curve is about, it's a great way to be an expression of that coffee, because really sample roasting is all about, exploring the character in the coffee. And if it's a great profile that helps us to explore the coffee, then I don't see why not. But yeah, it's interesting how I can see, if people are sort of saying, well, that's not my flavour preference, so then am I necessarily going to enjoy, that coffee as a result? But it's also, sometimes, curves don't always work as a best method of transferring information, if that makes sense. If anything, probably the best thing, and I think I've said it to you guys before, and one of the best things that you did for Cropster was putting in the phase marks, because that's what can be replicated from machine to machine. And so, and this is an area where I totally understand in the industry. Probably the one area where we lack a little bit of backing from science is the connection of a flavour to, where it's coming from, in a particular part of the profile. Because there's a lot, and I think that's the one thing in roasting at the moment. There's still a lot of theories. And there's not enough scientific backing to say, like for me, for example, I'm quite passionate about the, up until yellow, it's all about preparation and momentum, whereas normally it would be spoken about as being the drying phase, but really the whole roast is a form of drying. So I try and avoid, using, that. So for me, it's preparation and momentum, definitely, Maillard in the middle. But there's obviously a lot of thought process as far as in terms, sugar browning starting, caramelizing starting. But for me, it's the rock and roll territory part of the profile, because that's the backbone. That's the support structure for me in a profile. So, and I really do believe that body and sweetness is really a significant part of that section in the profile. Whereas a lot of theories out there is that body and sweetness comes after first crack, all that kind of stuff. Where for me, after first crack is finessing your final flavors, because everything's still happening. You've still got sugars caramelizing and degrading, and then then it's all about your acidity. Do we want a high low case acidity, or do we want to, kind of cook it out a little bit, round it out, and rely more on the sugar browning, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's definitely, but in terms of, moving from machine to machine, as far as like transferring information. So if you were to communicate, and this is something I was working on with a retail product, sort of like stop the project, but would like to sort of get into it, is in terms of on, our labeling on our packaging is actually communicating the phase times, along with obviously, you've got to also mention the probe type, thickness, or, all that kind of stuff. And then also it had like, a recommended rate of rise of each key part in the phase. And then, the temperature marks as well, because it's relevant to the probe, in terms of thickness and type and all that kind of stuff. But that's more of like communicating within the industry. Is it good for communicating with customers? Probably not. So then that brings up another whole, sort of like, area of like, how do we communicate our roasting, to customers and stuff like that. But yeah, kind of like, digressing a bit. But yeah, in terms of, I really think that, I think the phases are awesome. And I think it's one of the best things that's come into roasting, and it really allows for significantly awesome, great analysis. Because if the end flavour of a roast that you really like, and then you go back and analyse the timing of the phases, and what's creating that, you can consistently keep on replicating that. And that's kind of, coming to the sensory versus the data on the screen, and what are we focusing on in terms of how the data's mapping out on the screen versus what's going on inside the roaster in terms of, and it brings up the whole, are you roasting the coffee in the roaster, or are you roasting the data on the screen? It's that whole kind of, where do we, and that's where the whole craft and balancing of, know your green, know your machine, know your flavour profile, and then you can start showing yourself what to focus on. Yeah.
No, it gives us, I think, great ideas to where to maybe look next. And because we do a lot of, I mean, that's the crops data project is going on, of course, where we look at certain relationships and how to make it easier for people to understand. And if there's those correlations very clear, we can potentially make recommendations or, yeah, support people better in their process.
Yeah.
But cupping data is very critical in my opinion, but it's also very finicky in a way because it's a subjective process. And what's your take on that?
And that's definitely something that's probably been another little, passion side project as well, is really making sure roasters are clear on how they're assessing their coffee, because there is that little bit of past thought process that tasting coffee is a waste of time. And if it takes up time in the roasting day, then roasters aren't tasting their coffee because they're not getting into the process, or they're relying on customer feedback. And then, so you need to head into your roasting every day knowing what your coffee tastes like. So that, of course, then means, a cupping process is very efficient, very effective. But then it also brings along how we assess that cupping. And I really feel I don't think scoring has a place in production cupping, because it's it just really like bogs down the process, and it can make it very stressful. So I really encourage roasters to be, assessing, intensity of specific qualities, because that's what we're doing as a roaster. We're changing the intensity of a specific quality with our roast profile. So then we need to then go into that production cupping with an expectation of what the products should be tasting. So you need to have like a true to taste scale. So at the end of this cupping, is it true to taste? And if it's not true to taste, where did we miss the mark? And then you've got to have then like a way to show yourself, was it, the body that's missing, or the sweetness that's missing, or, there's too much acidity when there's not supposed to be acidity, all that kind of stuff. So then you know how to go back to your profile and target and change things, very quickly. So keeping the process very easy and clear, so roasters don't feel nervous about tasting, because there is still that thought that people think they're not good at tasting. But really, when you sort of like just really help them work through working on their instinct, just whatever they taste, mark it down. Because it's when our brain starts taking over, we get into a big massive pickle, and it's just like we start overthinking everything, and it just doesn't make it enjoyable. And then I think really then the scoring is really meant to be kept for our grading and quality checking and stuff like that. So I mean, internal scores in roasteries, like if there's like a 0 to 5 or 0 to 10 for a product, fine. But I think the 80-point scale really needs to shift away from production cupping, because it's really making the process unnecessarily stressful and not relevant. And it's not helping us then communicate and connect back to our roast profile. And because we just don't know what data to look at. Well, I mean, I'm scoring my production roast an 80 and it's meant to be 85. How do I fix that? Like, I don't know what's been impacted, kind of thing. And so that's my take.
And I know, and I kind of agree with that, because like I feel like getting away from the 80-point scale of the production roastery, it makes it more difficult to also then be able to figure out how to communicate that to the consumers, because at the end of the day, consumers not going to care if you have an 84 and 85 coffee. I mean, maybe if we want to be like the wine industry where you have like a 95-point wine, or we have a 94-point coffee, then cool. Maybe some consumers might know that, oh, this is 90 plus. This must be high quality coffee. But the majority, they're not even probably going to taste the 1 point or half point.
They're
difference.
Not quite connected. Yeah, exactly. And I guess I'm kind of also passionate too about maintaining the integrity of the 80-point scale. Is like keeping it as it's meant to be a quality check. And we've kind of by using it with our production roasting mixed things up a little bit as to the value, the true value of that scale and where it's meant to be directed in the industry. So, I
absolutely agree. And I think we see that, thankfully, also developing more and more that production sheets, production sheets are appearing. People feel less intimidated. They are much simpler. So you can really go through 20 samples in a more reasonable amount of time.
Yeah,
And
and it's amazing working with you guys too, because we can, you can help us, design one,
right,
with our own requirements, and that's fantastic.
yeah,
So we can still be working on our cuppings and being efficient, and being sustainable, and whether we, if we don't want to be using truckloads of paper, we can still be using, our software, and
right.
but still in a format that we're really happy with. So that's been, fantastic from your end. Having that flexibility to be able to help create a form, that we can use. Yeah.
Right, right. No, I love that too, and thanks for the feedback. I also think that since the wine just came up, right? So the 84 or the 92 wine, we're talking about a finished product, but
Yeah.
we would not dare. Nobody knows what point on what point scale the grape was, right? So that
Mm.
would be basically saying, hey, you're working with a 92 green coffee. Yeah, that's fine. But if you burn that down to a super dark roast, it's
Yep.
not at 92 anymore and
Yep.
something else. So that's why I think each step in the production chain deserves its own scale and its
Mm.
own recognition, which
Mhm.
is meaningful to a certain step in that supply chain, right? The green coffee is meaningful between producers, traders, and roasters. That's kind of where it ends. And once the roasted coffee comes into play, that's meaningful for roasters and consumers, of course,
Consumers.
cafes and
Yeah.
then consumers.
Enjoying this episode of the Coffee and Technology podcast? This podcast would not be possible without the support of Cropster. Whether it's tracking harvest yields, roastery and inventory management, or simply tracking brew recipes, Cropster Origin, Cropster Roast, and Cropster Cafe can help you streamline your workflows and help you operate more efficiently. So I'm kind of curious though, in the through the lens of the roaster that doesn't just buy from an importer, but does direct trade and buys from producers themselves. But also they have their own proper production roasting on the other side of the import. I'm curious to know, like, what's the balance between a roaster being able to um, cup for quality, cup for assessment, cup to buy from the producer, but then also be able to cup, for the post production roasting. There's obviously a big difference in the way you evaluate. Um, yeah, how does a roaster balance those two sides of cupping, I guess?
Oh, geez. Because you're also bringing in like roast level as well, and
Mhm.
so because I guess like with the initial evaluation, there isn't like I guess an expected or industry standard on how a sample roast should be prepared.
Mm.
And I really try my best, I quite like sticking within the, whether it's the CQI SCA protocols as far as, recommended roast time, the colors and all that kind of stuff, and keeping everything, because sample roastings, it's pretty intense, because you've got you can you can really under roast it, and you can quickly over roast it, because we're roasting such small amounts. And then we've also got to make sure that we're setting up the cupping properly, with all of the, the brew ratios, water quality, and we're following, everything, properly there. So, because we want to give that coffee every opportunity to shine, so we can then assess it properly. And also then relying on us to be able to assess it properly as well, with our knowledge of the use of the score sheet, and, providing, appropriate feedback. So then you start thinking that then moving into production in terms of, because then, so we're assessing those coffees. Well, when I'm purchasing, if you've got like a range of, like for example, in my roasting course on the weekend, we had a really awesome washed El Salvador, and it had the promising notes of citric acidity. I think there was apricot, but then there was
Mm.
also brown sugar, toffee. So there was a really good range of acidic notes and sugar browning notes. So in that initial sample process, you want to be roasting light enough so you can showcase everything. So what the elements are there. And then I might go, you know what, I'm not a really big fan of, those bright notes, the citric acidity and the tropical fruits and whatnot that was meant to be there. I'm going to take it in a sugar browning direction. So I'm going to put that product now into a more of a medium, maybe a medium dark roast, and whether it becomes, part of my blend, or maybe it is going to be a single origin with a slightly deeper roast level, something like that. So we're using that process to choose where in our portfolio we're going to start flicking that coffee. And of course, then we've got our repertoire of roast profiles to work with in terms of definitely an area where I think in the industry we really need to be really tidying up our communication in terms of, I think, just roast level, just like light, medium, dark. I'm really, trying to help roasters not assign a brewing technique to a roast level. So I don't call anything espresso roast anymore, because it's like, what is it? What is an espresso roast? And I don't say, filter roast or whatnot. So I really just using, because there's nothing to stop someone putting a light roast in an espresso machine, and there's nothing to stop someone from putting a dark roast in a V60. If they like the flavour, go nuts. But it can get confusing in roasting when you're trying to assign, I think, that brewing technique to a roast level, and it can make things very confusing. That's what I've just been sort of seeing, probably because I'm seeing a lot of new people come through the industry as well, and helping them kind of, because they're learning also how to brew coffee at the same time as roasting. And they will be bringing a specific flavour preference along with that learning process as well. So yeah, it's but yeah, from that sample to production, you're really using your sample to kind of decide where you want to place it, and then how then are you going to production roast it from there onwards. Yeah.
I think it's so complex also because consumer preference is changing and is adapting to what can be done. I just 4 years ago, or so 3-4 years ago, I went to a coffee house in Linz. That's the capital city of Upper Austria. It's very small, and there's a very small specialty coffee scene there. So it's not very well developed. So a lot of people drink just what's out there. And so I went to this coffee shop, very nice one, fairly new. And the guy is like, yeah, I can get you an espresso, or I have a single origin for the drip coffee. And then I said, can you put or single origin, the lighter roast, into the espresso? And he looked at me and it's like, oh my God, that's exactly what I do for myself, but nobody gets it. It was really delicious, but it's it will take, maybe they're there now, right? I haven't been back in maybe 2-3 years now in that specific shop. Maybe now his consumers understand, and maybe now he has an own hopper, an own grinder with with that coffee.
But even the way we communicate on our retail bags is just more in terms of light roast, medium roast, dark roast, as opposed to saying this is only, or this is an espresso roast. But then you might go, then your brain starts going, but I've only got a stovetop, or I've only got a AeroPress, or like, can I put that in those? Like, we've always got to think about our consumers and how they're interpreting, and what are they reading on the packaging, and how do they then relate that back? And often they also just want to know about strength as well, like how strong is it, how and so then I guess that roast level is a cleaner way to sort of help that whole process. And then of course you can have a little sign saying, we recommend you use this in blah 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 blah, so they can make a good decision about what machine to put it in, or just break the rules and do what they want, which is fine. Right. But it is challenging, I think, for the industry.
It's just like this continuous discussion of like, is specialty coffee accessible for consumers? And I feel like we're getting there. But I mean, even for me, way before when I was in high school and I even considered having a career in coffee, I was kind of that consumer where I wanted an espresso machine, I wanted to make latte art, and like, but to me, my assumption was like, oh, I can only use espresso roasted coffee. So I would go to Starbucks and like, I would think, oh, I have to get espresso roast. If I don't have espresso roast, then I'm not getting coffee today because, well, I can't use anything else for espresso. Obviously now I know that's not true, but I mean, it's easy to fall into.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then there's other terms out there that are being used that just get quite confusing. And then you sort of have these massive discussions about, well, why can't you use that roast level in a certain brewing method and blah, 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 blah. But it would just be so much easier if it was just, really, really simple as light, medium, dark. And, if there's in between, there's in between. And then customers can choose based on their flavour preference. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I just heard was just light and strong. A lot of people relate that to the caffeine content. And it's like, oh, I need a strong coffee because I need to wake up. And it's like, that's says nothing about it. You can drink whatever coffee here, and actually a drip coffee is probably helping you more.
Yeah, true. Exactly.
but
Yeah.
nobody
It's
knows
just a
that.
different kind of hit, I guess. Yeah. It's a creeper. Whereas,
Yeah.
you know, the espresso is the smack in the face.
Right.
And then you kind of just, you know, you get your high and off you go. And then it's like, yeah.
That tells you about people's preferences.
Yep. Are you a creeper or a
I'm a slap in the face. No, actually, in the office, I'm a creeper because that's what we have. We have a V60. But if I go to a coffee shop, that's
Yep.
also because I don't have an
Have an
espresso
espresso.
machine at home,
Yeah.
right? And I just like,
Oh, yeah.
No, that's awesome. So you know, Norbert mentioned a few minutes ago he hasn't been to Austria at this coffee shop in some time, and it makes me think, you know, now as you know, during COVID times, shifting gears a little bit, how has your ability to be still an effective coffee consultant changed from before COVID and now during COVID, and how has technology either enabled or disabled you to do your job efficiently and effectively?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's actually been great. Like everybody, we all just had to quickly learn, you know, how to use the platforms and all that kind of stuff. It's really interesting though, like training. You can kind of understand, especially like with something like roasting, people are still they love the face to face and the hands on. And so that's probably the only negative so I did definitely have to flip literally 100% of my world became face to face to online, you know, definitely, you know, after the first year and all of last year. So it's only now I'm getting the chance to sort of go, you know, back out again to see clients. But even still, people are still, it's funny, like some people are really great with doing an online session. They're still a little bit nervous about, you know, logging on or pressing the wrong button or getting something wrong. But at the end of the day, like we all just laugh about it and, you know, sort of, you know, keep going. But with the roasting, besides like missing that hands-on aspect, I mean, it's been great because we can still share screens and I can still be with the roaster when they're roasting. It's kind of funny, there's a lot more yelling because I've got to kind of go, what?
Yeah.
Because like the noise with it, so there's a lot of like, what's going on? But then the other thing as well, often we'll just have the software, you know, on the screen, so then I can watch what's going on as the software is recording. And then I can definitely make comment, you know, as we're going along there. So just, the ability to do that side of things. And look also too, I mean, it still was kind of great too that, you know, you could maintain that relationship part of the industry. And I met still meeting so many amazing people around the world that I would never have had the chance to meet unless I did, you know, they did one of my sessions at either SCA or at a coffee event. We're still getting that chance to meet amazing people around the world so I've got all these really amazing people. Hopefully when I can, you know, go and visit them and check out their roasteries and get beyond the screen. And so it really opened up another world of awesome roasting, you know, buddies to sort of like chat with. And it's been really cool. But of course, we do miss that little bit of hands-on you know, element, because you miss that ability to kind of like, well, okay, let's go to the roaster and you know, work on it and then taste. Probably the tasting side has slowed down because there has to be a little bit of like people would like then post the samples to me so I can taste. So there's a bit of a lag with the tasting aspect. Other than that, we can still get results very quickly on the roaster, no problem at all. So and I guess it's just it's been quite really interesting, but fun. Really cool.
But your future is coming back to the traveling, coming back to visit people.
Both. So sort of like definitely like locally, more of an opportunity to get back into visiting. But internationally will be interesting. I don't know. I mean, hopefully, you know, we can all see each other in April in Boston, which would be pretty cool. And planning a few other trips at the end of the year, and hopefully it can all happen. But the thing is, though, I think if we did have to stop quickly, we've now seen how good online you know, the platform is. So it's kind of like, oh, that's okay, we can just do a meeting online. Whereas before it would have been, oh, we can't see each other. Oh, what do we do? We've got to reschedule. and it would never have occurred to us to jump online to do a meeting or to do it online, I think, as well as we are now. Yeah.
So plan B is well established.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
And I was gonna say, I feel like also in some ways now things being remote, it's accelerated the sheer number of conversations and connections you can have, because now instead of
Yeah.
oh well, I can't travel to this part of the world until this month and now I have to plan it. It's like, let's get on a call tomorrow, and all
Yep.
of a sudden you know this person, you're connecting with this person. Yeah, it's not in face to face in person, but it's better than nothing. And I feel like
Yeah,
that's been
absolutely. Yeah.
accelerated.
Yeah, and the ability to continue being proactive and getting results is, it's definitely facilitated that really, really well. Yeah.
No, Anne, thank you so much for joining us today, and
Thank you so much for having me.
sharing a different perspective on all of this. I learned a ton. I know I learned, and it just makes me think of things differently as well every time we do this. So appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure. Well, hopefully, one day we get a chance to roast together. It'd be amazing.
I'm down.
Yes.
We'll do it online.
I'm down.
Yeah, first you needed a roasting machine. We don't even have roasting machines at Cropster.
Oh no! So call out to the universe. Who's going to sponsor a little roaster for the Cropster office?
Yeah, we need a training center. I mean, there's some ideas out there, right? That will be awesome to have like Cropster training center, a few machines there. Consultants come out to because that's not ours, right? We will not consult on coffee, but having the space available and that would be cool.
Yeah, at least just have some different examples of things that that do impact our experience, whether it be with the roaster and with the software, and you can demonstrate that really well. So call out to any manufacturers that want to help set up the Cropster education center.
Yes,
like
exactly.
Yeah.
I have one final personal question, Anne. When you moved to the US, did your accent change?
Yes, it did.
But did your folks at home say something about it?
No, but I know I had to be really careful. I think like when I would say okay, I had to go okay. I had to drop. I would go okay. And I used to live in Hoboken in New York. So, but initially I think we would have said Hoboken or Hoboken. Yeah, so I really had to change the way I would pronounce certain things. And yeah, it was really fun. And just different words. Oh my God, cupping was so much fun because the different words you would say. I think we were cupping some really long dark coffee. I think as I loved how Noah said NASCAR fuel. That kind of like, we were doing some roast for, all the Diner Bodega coffees, and it was like really dark roasted coffee. And I said, oh, this tastes like bitumen. And my friend went, what? Who are you calling a bitch? Like, and I went, well, the roads. They went, oh, asphalt. And I went, no, in Australia we call it bitumen. Because I meant that it was really rough and it was just really just like earthy and just like you'd lick the road. And so just different terms and different, things that you say. And yeah, cupping was awesome. Something always came up.
Well, that makes me think of a question I had too. Because even with that, like, I wouldn't say our palates from Australia and the US are exactly the same, but I can imagine what was it like specifically coffee culture when you came here in terms of like how the coffees tasted, how you communicated coffee, the energy of coffee? What was different about it in New York versus where you came when you came from Queensland?
That's really interesting because I think as Aussies, we really know US culture through whether it be movies, TV, the internet. So because I'd come through all the barista competitions and all of that sort of things, I knew the US coffee culture from the competition. So I was aware of the baristas, some of the cafes to go and visit and the brands and stuff like that. So, you naturally always go, you always head towards either, I think it was at the time, would have been Stumptown for sure, was always the first stop. and then you start then searching all the other, sort of local, cafes that have been popping up on social media and stuff like that. So I was very driven initially from that, I guess, media experience to then search for the coffee places to go to, and then start attending, industry events, because it was terrifying. I mean, I was convinced I wasn't going to be able to get, work. But then it's like anything, if you don't put yourself out there. It was probably the one time where I was in the right place at the right time, because I went to one of the Dallas Brothers monthly cupping events. And so I went along, helped with the cupping, and then did the old hanging around. So let me help you clean up the cupping table. And hi, my name's Anne. I'm a roaster from Australia. I've just moved here. And do you have any jobs available? And you just start, getting to know people and putting yourself out there. And I think, with the coffee culture, I kind of knew where to go initially, and I was quite excited. And I think probably my best experience was Third Rail Espresso, and where I saw how US baristas would work, in the sense of where they had pumping on the espresso machine, but with the drip coffee also being quite a large focus, obviously, in the cafes more so than Australia. And so they were getting smashed. They were really busy. And I was really nervous. I really wanted a Chemex. And so they're in their morning rush, and they're mad busy on the machine. I went, can I have a Chemex? And they went, yeah, absolutely. And it probably was the first time I saw them, dealing with all the pre-weight doses. They just ground it, started pouring it, and they were still, multitasking, big time, doing filters, doing espresso, serving, the rush. And I just said to myself, man, if this happened in Australia, like, Australian baristas would just crack it if they were asked to do a pour over in the middle of a rush. Not now, but back in the time, this was in 2009. Now we've got great technology to deal with, as far as, where we can do, our pour overs and espresso at the same time and still be rushed, and, even manage a, busy time and everything. But I was a bit spoiled. I kind of knew some good places to start targeting and going to, and start going from there. But I think it was great. But definitely seeing the brewing, like walking into a cafe and seeing just all the brewers being more of the, I guess, the main, things that machines, equipment that baristas dealt with, and the espresso machine was in the corner, sort of off to the side. Yeah. And then all the brewing was, front and center. Whereas now I'm definitely seeing that shifting in cafe design, where the machine's kind of slowly bringing its way into the center of the counter, and all the pour over and stuff is around it, more so. So, really interesting. But, just learning that brewing culture and asking for a cup of coffee and forgetting that I'm going to get a cup of brewed coffee, not a cup of, like, whether it be, espresso or flat white or something. So, really interesting. But it was great.
Oh, and the US market also learned what a flat white is. So it is something. Yeah. It's still not very common, but you can find it on some menus.
Yeah.
It's I mean, I always get. I mean, I've heard this multiple times, but every time it's just as fascinating hearing an Australian compare, like, Australian coffee culture and US coffee culture, because there's always that distinct difference that.
I think it's just the brewing and the espresso.
Exactly. The brewing versus filter, like,
you would die if you saw, like, so it's really funny that down here we call it batch brew or batches, and so we're all using Mocha Masters, to do that brewing. There's a few Fetcos and whatnot floating around, but the most common machine is the Mocha Master, and it's treated like very like it's really unique and special. But you would really hate the way that it's managed. It doesn't get managed very well. So you'll see a press pot on the bench, and you'll walk in, say, mid-morning, and you go, oh, great, I can get a batchy. And then I always ask, so what time was it brewed at? And I'll go, oh, first thing this morning it opened. And, like, a US barista would die, because, like, we don't manage the time. We don't manage those batch brews very well. So, when you get a chance to come down, we'll do a little batch brew test cafe crawl, and we'll see, how bad they are at managing their batch brews. It's terrible.
Good thing is ground control is coming, so that will take a lot of guesswork and
but there just needs to be better management in terms of how long it's sitting in the pot for, and all that kind of stuff. So Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much, Anne. Appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Coffee and Technology Podcast. To learn more about Cropster, subscribe to this podcast and follow us on social media. For more educational content, visit cropster.com/learn.